Hello, fellow book readers. My name is John, and I am here today to talk about 2025. Yes, 2024 is almost all over already as the holidays drift into the past. So, today I'd like to talk about the book series and the standalones I plan to read in 2025. I don't know if I'll get to them all. Some of these are quite large, chunky books, and some of them have a lot of books in the series. So who knows? Anything could happen. But this is what I plan to try to read. So let's get started. First up, at number 5 would be The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. Now, this series is kind of a large series. I think it's 14 books plus a prequel, so 15 total. And that's a lot. And from my understanding, there is quite a bit of a slog in the middle of the series, or books that are just boring. And what's kind of kept me away from it for so many years. But it is sort of one of the more well-regarded fantasy series of all time, or at least one of the more popular fantasy series of all time, right? So I figure I have to give it a shot at some point. Why not this year? I don't really know much about it. All I know is that the first book, Eye of the World, is a lot like Fellowship of the Ring, but then the series quickly departs from that and goes in a completely different direction. That's interesting. And I know some of the characters. I know Rand is kind of, I don't know if well regarded is the right word, but he's sort of like a popular character in the fantasy sphere. So look forward to meeting the whole cast, honestly, and learning about them. Number 4 would be The Magicians by Lev Grossman. Right now I only own the first book in the series. Now this book is, a lot of people talk about the series like it's a Harry Potter type series, but my understanding is it's more like a Chronicle of Narnia series, where it's sort of a portal fantasy. Yeah, it's about this adult, I think his name's Quentin, and he learns he has magical powers, and he goes to a school to learn about it, where all sorts of shenanigans happen, let's say. I think I'm going to like this series. Everything I've heard about it sounds like it's a series for me. I know some people do not like this series. I think I'm going to like it, and I haven't ever read any Lev Grossman books, so I'm looking forward to it. Number 3 would be The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. Kuang? I'm not entirely sure how you say that name. So this series is a historical epic fantasy. It's based on mid-20th century China, or I shouldn't say based on mid-20th. It has influences from mid-20th century China. And yeah, I heard it's like a big, epic, sort of grimdark fantasy, and I love grimdark. Song of Ice and Fire is one of my favorite series of all time. So I think I'm going to like this a lot. Heard there's even a dragon in it. The second book is called The Dragon Republic, so maybe. All right, number 2 would be The Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This is part of her Grishaverse. I actually started reading Shadow and Bone last night on my Kindle, because it's on Kindle Unlimited, so it's free. And I got to page 50, and I really like the hook. I know people say Shadow and Bone isn't as good as Six of Crows, but the hook in the first 50 pages of the first book in the Shadow and Bone trilogy is really good. So that only leads me to be more excited to read this series, which everyone says is amazing, and the relationships are really good, and the characters are awesome. It's not a heist fantasy. I read Mistborn last year, which was also a heist fantasy. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading this one a lot. And it's kind of short too. 22 books, and the books are not super chunky. It's exciting. Right, number 1 on the list would be The Stormlight Archive, which Era 1 was finally finished in December when Wind and Truth came out. And obviously, this series is written by Brandon Sanderson. I read 4 Brandon Sanderson books last year, the original Mistborn trilogy, and Tress of the Emerald Sea, and I gave all 4 stars and above. I love those books. I think I'm going to love this. Everyone says The Stormlight Archive is like his magnum opus. The books are really chunky, so I hope I enjoy them. But I think I'm going to. It's sounds like epic fantasy the way epic fantasy is meant to be, and that excites me a lot. I know there's some sci-fi elements in the later books, but for the most part, it's just an epic fantasy from what I've heard. And I look forward to getting to know the characters. I know Kaladin is a character I hear a lot about, so forward to finally meeting him. Okay, and let's go to the now. Now, like I said, these 5 series, they're all large. They all have big books. Besides for Six of Crows, so I don't know if I'm going to be even able to get to another series this year. But if I am, I would like to read the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. I haven't read any Realm of the Enderlings books before. I've never read Robin Hobb before. Everything I've heard about that series is great, and I think I'll like it. So yeah, I look forward to getting to read that either this year or next year if I don't have time this year. And the second one, if I have time, would be The Witcher by Andrzej Sapkowski. I am so sorry. That is definitely not how you pronounce that name, but I don't know how to pronounce it. Series I've wanted to read for a few years now, and yeah, if I can get to it, I'll get to it this year, but I really doubt it. That's last on the list, probably a next year type thing. Now, there are some other books I want to read that are either continuations of series where the book is coming out this year, or they're new series where the first book's coming out this year, or they're just standalones. And I don't know how many of them I'm going to be able to get to, but I think I'm going to definitely be able to get to these 4 at least. The first one would be Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros, which comes out in January. It's the 3rd book in her Imperium series. I just call it the Fourth Wing series. I really liked the first 2 books. Fourth Wing I thought was great. And Iron Flame was just good, but it was like good and I enjoyed it. So it was like near great. So yeah, I'm looking forward to Onyx Storm, and the cliffhanger at the end of Iron Flame is really interesting. So I want to see where she goes with that. The next one would be Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales by Heather Fawcett. This is the 3rd and final book in her Emily Wilde series. I loved the first 2 books. The first book was one among my favorites I read last year. I thought it was a perfect book. The second book was great too. I didn't think it was as perfect as the first book, but these books are how you do cozy fantasy. And I really like the way the second book ended, and I don't know where she's going with the 3rd book. I kind of know where she's going with the 3rd book, actually, but I don't know how the story is going to have a conflict per se. So we'll see how that works out. I think it's going to be great, though. The first 2 books delivered, and the cast of characters are amazing. So, yeah, definitely on my list. It comes out in February. The 3rd one is a new series. It's coming out in May. It's called The Stonewater Kingdom. That's the name of the series. The name of the book is The Knight and the Moth, and it's by Rachel Gillig. She wrote One Dark Window and 2 Twisted Crowns, which I loved. I loved both those books. I gave both of them 5 stars. I think they're both perfect books. 2 Twisted Crowns is among my favorite books I've ever read. It's amazing. I really look forward to this new series. And it's a duology, too. It's supposed to be a duology. I don't know when the second book's coming out. But she loves duologies. She has said this in interviews before. So, yeah, I look forward to it. I fully believe it'll be great because she just seems like a great writer. And the last up would be Fever Dream by George R.R. Martin. It's his standalone vampire slash ship story that's kind of like set in like the Baton Rouge, New Orleans area. It seems really interesting. And yeah, last year I read The Ice Dragon and Dream Songs Volume 1. I'd like to continue reading some more George R.R. Martin because I love him as an author. I think he writes really interesting characters, really interesting plot lines. His books tend to be a bit sad. They tend to be a bit bitter, tend to be a bit tragic. But there's always hope, too. There's always just that sprinkle of hope he throws in at the end. It's awesome, and he does it better than anybody, I think. So, yeah, I look forward to reading Fever Dream, which is not a fantasy. I don't know what you would consider it. I guess sort of a horror slash sci-fi slash maybe a bit of fantasy in there. But yeah, it's definitely something I want to read this year. I almost read it last year, but I chose Dream Songs instead. This year, I'm going to try to read Fever Dream. And if I have more time, I'd like to read Dream Songs Volume 2, which I heard is not as good as Dream Songs Volume 1. But it's another collection of short stories by George R. that are written like post-90s. And one of the stories I've already read in it. those are the definite stories I want to read for 2025. I don't know if I'm going to get to them all. The one I'm most skeptical of is Wheel of Time, just because it's such a long series. I mean, it's 15 books, and or like 4 of them are just like real pain in the ass to read. So, and they're all chunky too. None of them are like, oh, these books are small. They're all very chunky. But it's one of the most well-regarded fantasy series of all time, and I feel like I owe it to myself to at least attempt to read it. So, with that being said, that is my least definitive TBR for 2025. There might be other books that I throw in there. I'm sort of a mood reader, so things could change, but I will definitely try to get to at least those 5 series, and the 4 standalones will definitely happen, for sure. So, with that being said, let me know what you guys plan on reading in 2025. And have a great rest of the year.